Arquebus. Arquebus is the fourth installment in the Man of Iron system, a system that depicts battles of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. We started with Man of Iron itself, then we have Infidel about the Crusades, we had Blood and Roses about the War of the Roses. Now we are in the battles for northern Italy between the late 15th and the middle of the 16th century, 1549, 1495, 1544. If we continue like this, we're gonna have Men of Iron, Market Garden, and Vietnam, but that's okay because it's a good system. Just kidding, I don't think it will work very well in modern times. But it is a system that I enjoyed in the past. If you looked at my video reviews, I love the system. I'm not a big fan of the implementation of the system in the scenarios of Men of Iron, but then the scenarios got better and better. In Infidel, you had more mobility, which I think is something that Men of Iron really needed. But at the same time, I found the battles to be a little bit samey in the long run. They kind of like look like each other a little bit. With Blood and Roses, we had more variety. Arquebus, well, we're gonna see where the system has gone here. There are a couple of twists, a couple of new ideas, especially due to the introduction of firepower. Not so much the introduction, you have a little bit of that before, but the fact that firepower now actually becomes a factor, that guns in the battlefield are not just making noise and smoke, but actually doing something. When firepower starts having a really relevant impact on the conduct of battle. Arquebus, let me show you how the game works. The game comes with two large double-sided maps with a lot of different battlefields that are used in different scenarios, a lot of different scenarios and a lot of variety there. Variety from the point of view of the landscape, the organization of the troops, the objectives. That also means you have unique rules for different scenarios that add to the complexity, but then you have a lot of replay value because of different battles. So you have Marignano, Ravenna. On the other side here we have Agnadello, Fornovo, with this very interesting river right in the middle, which of course will create all sort of tactical challenges. Pavia, the largest map and definitely the centerpiece of the set. Then we have Bicocca, Cerignola, which is a very good starting scenario because it's small and it's a good training scenario. And then we have Cerezola. So a lot of variety, definitely a lot of maps, a lot of scenarios, good value here. Units in this game are divided in leaders, such as this one, and combat units. Combat units belong to formations commanded by the leaders, and they're identified by stripes at the bottom of the counter that tells you who is the leader that controls that unit. Also, units must always be facing a vertex of the hex in which they are, because orientation is important. You will have two hexes that count as the front, the flank, and the rear of a unit. Having a closer look at the leaders, yes, there may be a lot of information here. Here you have charisma, which is used during combat. Movement allowance is this number here in this black rectangle. The number in the circle is range. To be fully operational, units belonging to the formation controlled by the leader need to be within that range in excess. Then here we have activation rating. This is a very important element in this game. And then we have very small here, a modifier for effectiveness. As for the combat units, they will look kind of like this. The number here is simply the identification that you use when you're setting up the game. And here, if there is an indication here, number and some letters, that means that the unit is capable of range combat, and the number there is the modifier. For example, this unit has an arquebus, but when attacking with that weapon has a -2. Then we have a modifier here that is used in shock. This identification here, these two letters tell you what type of unit that is. And we have again the stripe, which is very important, and movement allowance. So these are the basic things about the counters. And differently from other games, say about the Middle Ages or even the earlier Renaissance, here you have units that have a melee capability with a limited range capability, whereas in many games about this period, very often you have units that only specialize in melee or only specialize in whatchamacallit, in range combat. Now, this system, as I said, is based on activations. That is, a player will activate a leader, and then the units in the formation controlled by that leader will move and or use range attacks, and then units can initiate shock combat and or charges. However, this is not a you go, I go. That is, it's not like I activate a leader and you activate one, or I activate all of mine and you activate all of yours. There is a system that creates an unpredictable flow and shifting of the initiative and shifting of the role of active player between the two players. How does it work? Well, as I said, leaders have an initiative, an activation number here. So you roll a die. Well, first you get, when it's your turn to finally activate your units, you simply choose one of your leaders and you activate that leader and all the units belonging to the leader. Again, move, range attacks, possible charges and combat, and so on and so forth. Then, if you want to go again, you choose another leader. You cannot activate the same leader twice in a row. And you roll a die, you possibly apply modifiers, and if you roll equal to or lower than the activation rating of the leader that you're trying to activate, then that leader gets to activate. So you get to activate 2 in a row. After that, you may try to activate a third one and a fourth one, and so on and so forth. It's just that the more you activate, the more leaders you activate in a row, trying to just create this big momentum, the worse are the modifiers, so less likely you are to succeed to activate a lot of them. Also, there's a possibility for the other player to try to seize initiatives by spending special counters to steal the initiative from you. Again, that player also needs to roll a die to see if that is the case. So between a player attempting to get multiple activations and the other player trying to get in the way by stealing initiative and then possibly starting a chain of activations, you have a very interesting and unpredictable system of activation, which also makes the game very suitable for solitaire play, because you usually do not have hidden information and you're not able to predict too much ahead of, well, who's gonna go next, so you can still surprise yourself even when you are playing both sides at the best of your possibilities. Movement, nothing particularly special there. You move your units that you have activated up to their full movement allowance if they are within range. And also, of course, different types of terrain will modify your movement rating. As for combat, it's a very interesting system. It's both, I wouldn't say it's both simple and complicated. It's a very simple system, but has a lot of interesting modifiers, and those really are important because they are what gives flavor to the game. You're trying to maneuver in such a way to get a lot of good modifiers to make your attacks more powerful, and you're trying to prevent the opponent from getting a lot of good modifiers. Range attacks are resolved using these tables here, and you take into account all modifiers that apply. A big modifier, of course, is the range of modifiers that you get depending on the weapon that you're using and the range you're firing at. As you see, when we're looking at handheld weapons, the range is extremely short. Already firing at 2x of distance is particularly difficult, impossible past that because you get difficult because you get these negative modifiers. Artillery is more powerful, but again, it's limited range. You need to get quite close to use range attacks. So that is one of the possible modifiers as showed here. And then we have possible terrain, modifier on the counter. I showed you earlier those modifiers. Other modifiers based on who is attacking whom. Once you have all the modifiers, you roll a die. The game uses a d10. And then you look at the 5 result table based on whether the target is on foot or mounted and whether it is in normal state, so with the counter with this side face up, or disordered flip to the other side, and as you can see, there is a D representing that worsened state of the formation. If you're firing against a unit in normal state, pretty much you will have no effect or disorder the unit. Those are the results that are available. If you're firing against a disorder unit, then you have maybe no effect, or you may have a plethora of bad stuff happening from retreat to retiring the unit to eliminating the unit. So again, very simple. Roll a die, apply the modifiers, but trying to get the good modifiers, the right weapon, firing against the right target, in the right location. That is what the game is about, at least when it comes to range combat. Shock combat, and again, that's the basic idea. As you can see, you will roll a die, apply modifiers, choose a column based on normal or disordered status of the target unit, also whether it is shock or charge combat. Charge combat, of course, you need mounted units, you need to approach the enemy in a certain way that is gaining momentum. Cavalry charges are always fun in games of this type, but then there is a fairly complicated system of like counter-charging, charging the charger, etc, etc, etc. When you learn the game, if you want, you can skip the counter-charger thing. I don't think you miss all that much, and then once you're familiar with the rest of the rules, you can add that. But the idea is, again, find the right column, find the right modifiers, roll a d10, and see what the result is, which could be disordered, engaged, retired, applying to one side or the other. The modifiers, again, very important. The defender shock defense modifier, you find it on the counter. The strength advantage has to do with the number of units involved. Weapon system matrix. This seems cumbersome to newer gamers, but it's very important to game with in games about the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, where there is such a disparity of different units, because really if a mounted unit is charging against another mounted unit, or pikes, and that's painful, or light infantry, which is particularly easy, there should be a difference. So what you do is you look at the attacker, and if the attacker has a unit belonging to one of these groups, then you go down the column, you cross-reference with the type of unit that is being attacked, and kaboo, you find the modifier, which may be very positive, pretty negative. It all depends on, well, are you throwing your horses against the pikes? Well, that should be pretty painful. That makes sense to me. So you find the modifier that is based on that one, and also again, it seems cumbersome, but after a while, it really makes sense. It's very thematic. You already know if you're using mounted men against pikes that something bad is going to happen. It'll become second nature very easily. And then we have other modifiers, the most important ones really being whether the attacker is disordered or not, the ability of the leader, and the position of the attacker respective to the target, because of course attacking through flanks or rear will give you an advantage. Again, so you see, this is fun stuff, because to get those modifiers, you're going to maneuver around and try to get the best possible modifiers. You're also trying to chain attacks one after the other, so that with one punch you disorder the unit, with a later punch you cause more damage, and so on and so forth. The game has different scenarios, so you have different rules and conditions, but the general idea is that you're trying to inflict enough damage on the opponent to get them to roll for routing. It's not a game, well, I inflict a certain number of damage or knew a certain amount of damage and I win automatically. If I inflict that number of damage points, if I inflict enough damage, then the opponent that has taken that damage has to roll every turn. Most likely that means that the player will roll, because when you fail a morale roll at that point, you lose the game. There is a chance if the situation is balanced, the two sides are very close to each other, then one side starts rolling to see if they are defeated, then the other side gets to roll too, and maybe the other side is going to be rare, but there is a little bit of variability there. Again, it adds randomness, which probably not everybody will like, but again, if you're a solitaire player, the fact that even when an army has inflicted a lot of damage on the opponent doesn't lose entirely. That fact adds more fog of war, more unpredictability, and therefore it makes the game even more friendly to the solitaire player who is playing both sides at the best of his or her possibilities. So as I said in my introduction, I like the system in general, and I found that the series kept improving from title to title, and Arquebus is no exception. To me, Arquebus is better than its predecessors, and I already like the predecessors, so I'm happy to have this game in my collection. I like the system in general, and again, it's not gonna change your mind about Men of Iron. If you didn't like before, if you didn't like the system is the same. Again, if you didn't like the scenarios, maybe Arquebus can convince you, but the system itself still has that flow from one side to the other, that's constantly subjected to uncertainties, and I like that. I like that very much. I said, if you didn't like it before, you want to like it here because it's the same. Why would you not like it? Because instead of having I go, you go, then you have that element of uncertainty, that pushing your luck. I guess maybe some of you are just like really schematic planners, but probably you'll be playing a Euro game instead of a war game. If you're a war gamer and you have an appreciation for the element of fog of war, the unpredictability of battle, then I think you will enjoy Men of Iron. Probably you have enjoyed the system in the past, and you will like seeing this in Arquebus. Again, just because of the uncertainties, just because of the fun that happens, it's something that I like in war games, from having to deal with uncertainties rather than being able to count on the fact that unpredictable things never happen. Unpredictable things happen all the time. Now, the fact that you get a sense of the activation power of your leaders, of course, again, gives you a sense of what might most likely happen, but then constantly fate will throw a wrench in your plans, and that is perfectly fine. Again, because the fun in wargaming and the fun in the Men of Iron system, it consists, in my opinion, precisely in this, in having to deal with uncertainties. Also, that makes the game, the previous games in the system, and this game too, perfectly suitable for solitaire play, because you cannot see too far ahead. You will be surprising yourself all the time, or I should say, the game will surprise you. And again, you will have to look at the situation with fresh eyes all the time, which is fun. So perfectly suitable for the solitaire player. Introductory level, I don't know, maybe for a committed player that has never played war games before and is interested in the theme. There are a couple of little rules here and there, especially when it comes to the scenarios. My impression was that there were more individual rules, more special rules than in previous games, but maybe it's just my impression. I haven't played yet the games in the system for quite a while. It's not that conceptually anything is particularly hard to grasp, because there is such a huge list of single individual special rules, so that it's daunting. With a little bit of patience, I believe even a novice of wargaming should be able to approach this game. And so once you get in the system and once you get the individual rules of the battles, then I find that this set here of all of in the Men of Iron system is probably the one that has the most replay value, probably more value for your money, because you really feel that a lot of the battles are different from one another. They have a different architecture, different setup, different type of units, different combinations, command limitations. The Swiss do their own thing. Other people have different types of limitations and special rules. Again, little bit of extra complexity, but then also more detail, more flavor, more chrome. From the point of view, again, of the variety of the experience that this set offers, I think this is a notch above the previous ones. From that point of view, this is definitely the best set in the system. I liked some of the new units. I like the mixed units. They can pack a punch when they are melee, and they have some limited range capability you didn't have nearly that much before. I like that this hybrid thing You will find some units here that simply you didn't find in other games. You do not find very often in other games, simply because they were specific of this style of warfare here, specific of this period in time, as the battlefield was changing, and therefore new techniques were being developed or tested out to see if there was a way of counteracting, for example, mass formations of pikes. And you will be able, literally, you'll be able here to play with some types of units that do certain things that you do not have in war games about the Middle Ages or about the full Renaissance. This transition period that is depicted in the game also lets you play with some unusual types of meta units. That's fun. There is variety in that too. So the system is strong with maybe a little more extra learning required because of the unique rules, unique abilities, and the specific details of the scenario. So a little bit of homework required, but not much. But in general, definitely a very satisfying set with a lot of replay value, with a lot of different gameplay experiences that you can have from this set. Arquebus definitely gets a big endorsement for me because I like the system in general, and I definitely like this implementation of the system. The implementation of the system that you find in these scenarios, to me, that makes it the strongest set in the Men of Iron system so far.